I'm Africa.
And I'm Busara. Today, this is now it's our eighth episode. Yes, we got that right this time, yes. So we got our 8th episode going on. And today we're talking about expectations. So I know that when I told her, the podcast, the title and kind of just the topic of today, she was like, what about expectations? So expectations we may put on ourselves, expectations that society puts on us, expectations that we put on others, and expectations that maybe just how people may view us or label us, kind of the expectations that those type of people in that label kind of carry, or people that put on that. I kind of wanted to go into, I know that just in general, in terms of I would say like the younger generation, or when you're at a certain age, your expectations are usually to go to college. I know that we talked about that in a little bit in our other podcast, to go to college, or just to get have money, get a job, that type of thing. And when we don't necessarily do those things, how we may feel, that's literally kind of how what we talked about in the last podcast. But I think that oftentimes what makes it so that it's hard for us to achieve those things, and we don't really enjoy them, is because of those expectations. And kind of if we don't meet them the way that it feels, and the crushing feeling that it may hold, because we're trying to hold ourselves up to an expectation or a standard that someone else put on us, and that this is how it looks, rather than understanding that this is just our journey and how things are supposed to go. And when you take things for what they are, and not what you feel like they're supposed to be, but just for what they are, you'll see that ultimately you always end up getting what you want at some point, because it was all part of the plan, rather than in the moment that you may feel, because it's what others may say, the expectations may put on us. So I kind of just wanted to talk about that as a whole. What do you kind of feel about expectations in any of those categories?
So when you first told me what the topic of the conversation was going to be, and you said that it was going to be expectations, immediately I thought about just regular conversations that I know I've had with other clients, and other individuals, and how it's so difficult and can be so depressing and hard to try to meet these false expectations that we even have of our own selves. And so with that being said, if you could just imagine somebody creating a list, a to-do list, okay? This is what I want to do, with my life, and it's going to consist of X, X, Y, Y, and Z, Z. Well, one of the main things that people struggle with is not just not being able to complete any of that stuff, but then to not finish what they started. And so when they're not able to finish what they started, then they get frustrated, and instead of sticking to what it is that they started off doing in the very beginning, they jump to something else. So I kind of call those individuals jumpers, because it's like, okay, you were doing one thing and you got frustrated or bored with it, and maybe things weren't going your way, and then you said, okay, I'll forget about this, and then I'll just go off to something else. But they have found that it's been the same pattern every single time they've left one thing behind and they've jumped to something else. And so I just try to leave the conversation open for my clients, in particular, to be able to express how those false expectations have contributed greatly to the disposition that they are in. And oftentimes, again, you just see this vulnerability that maybe they've never displayed before. And so they say things like, yeah, I really wish if I had the opportunity to do this over, that I would do things differently. I wouldn't be so hard on myself. I constantly disrespected myself, and I was not kind to myself. I really did not give myself credit where credit was due. And I did not give myself positive affirmations. If anything, I was being a negative Nancy or a negative Nathan. Absolutely.
Yeah, and expectations without an affirmation or some type of just positive message in general. Sorry, the dog just busted through the door there.
Do you want me to do it?
It's fine. I guess we'll just let them be. But yes, expectations without a positive affirmation is really just kind of just really it's a possibility of war mentally, because if you're trying to meet certain expectations like usual in terms of just what you may feel is something that you should be doing or what others may say, and then you're not constantly, when things go wrong, affirming yourself that everything is okay and that you're still on the right path and that everything happens for a reason. It makes it hard. And like you said, that there are times where people start something and they stop because they may get frustrated in those moments where it's like, it's not supposed to go this way, or other people didn't have to go through this, or why is it hard for me? Without affirming themselves, like, hey, though I want to meet these expectations, the fact that I'm doing it and I'm growing and being better as a person, that's ultimately what matters. It doesn't matter in terms of when I get to that point, or, in terms of just expectations that you may want to hit. And when it's expectations that people may put on yourself, that's them. Like, that has nothing to do with you. So affirming yourself even in those times when people are saying things about you or saying what you should be doing, and affirming yourself that you are in yourself and that whatever you choose to do and be who you are, that's good enough ultimately. At the end.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that you said that, because there are a lot of examples out there on how to live life, or how you should quote unquote live your life, but at the end of the day, nobody can add or take away anything from your life or your life experiences. So you really living your life for you is really all that matters. And I think about the amount of people who have sang, I put that in quotes, like sang popular songs, shoulda, coulda, woulda, if I could go back in time and change this, one more chance, if I could just do this over, then I would have taken, a different direction instead of listening to this person or that person. And so oftentimes I feel like we are greatly influenced and impacted by other people's thoughts and other people's words. And that if we don't meet their expectations, then it's like, well, in their eyes, I'm a nobody. But that also speaks a lot about the person who is living their life based on what somebody else has tried to shape and mold them to be. And so if I know that I struggle with living my own life, and I'm constantly trying to fit this mold or this cookie cutter shape that other people want me to be, then the question then becomes, okay, well then who am I really? Where is my real identity? And so this is why so many people struggle and they have a hard time coming to terms with how they ended up losing quote unquote friends or loved ones or their quote unquote support system, now that they no longer fit that mold, or now that they are no longer that puppet for those other individuals. Oh, you stopped doing what I wanted you to do, and so on and so on. And I wanted to add that this also brings back up, I believe, a story that I was talking about in one of our last episodes, where I was saying that there was an individual, and he was like, I believe like maybe in his 50s. And he came up to me and said, Miss Africa, still to this day, I try to seek that validation and acceptance of my father. When I was growing up, he wanted me to be this and he wanted me to be that. And I promise you, I did everything that he said, and it still wasn't good enough for him. So oftentimes too, and I know that this may be hard to hear, but even our own family members, they really don't want that authentic relationship with us. They want to be in relationship with the things we have and our accomplishments. And those are two totally different things.
Yeah.
Because if any of that stuff were to ever go away, then you know that they would walk away from you, or they would constantly be judging you. And the other thing I want to say too is it even goes for friends. It goes for anybody. Some people are your friend because it's convenient for them to be your friend. Oh, as long as you have this and as long as you have that, then we're friends. We're the best of buddies. Everything is a good time. You know, oh, I listen to you. I'm here for you. But God forbid something happen and maybe you lose everything, or you don't have that stuff anymore for whatever reason. Oh, well, now I don't want to hear from you. Yeah. Or now, you know, we're not friends anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think oftentimes that, you know, that is just how it's looked at. Like when you see somebody, you know, subconsciously you kind of have an idea of them in your head without obviously knowing them. Once you get to know them, you kind of, you know, change it a little bit. But in terms of just the types of friends that you may want, the type of friend group that, just from down to the littlest things that people may wear. People always, you know, categorize you in a certain way if you do certain things, look a certain way, wear certain things, purchase certain things. You know, it's always like an expectation or kind of just something that you're expected to do if you know are in those things. And because of that, you know, if you do change that, there are people, like you said, friends or even family that may like, oh no, like I'm not okay with that, like you should be more like this, and you should do this, and you'll end up either losing them or losing yourself. It's either one or the other. If you continue to try to please the other people, you'll end up losing yourself. But if you do you and you allow the people that are actually for you, that see you for who you are, that are not want to be around you only because of what you have, what you say, what you do, then you'll ultimately be able to feed yourself and that self-love that we go back to every time. And in terms of that. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I like how you added that in there. And I also want to say that this conversation reminds me of something that I recently was discussing with some clients of mine, and they were saying that from their experiences in life, the more and more they tried to meet the expectations of other people, the more and more they realized it was never good enough in the first place. And I gave the example, I said, it doesn't matter, you know, what people quote unquote like you for or respect you for. You know, the bottom line is they have created this expectation of you. I'm expecting this person to show up like this, or I'm expecting that this person is going to do this. And because I expect those things, then that's why I respect them, right? So it doesn't matter if you're affiliated in the streets, you've got credibility, and you're showing your battle scars and your wounds, and you're like, oh, look at me, I'm tough, and, you know, I've done this and I've done that, you know, da-da-da-da-da. People will want to be around you because of those things. And it's like, okay, then either you're buying them or they're buying you. Because if that were not your situation, would they even have any reason to be, you know, standing around you or, you know, standing behind you? But it's the same thing when you talk about success to a degree, like having, and I'm not saying that, you know, success only equates to material possessions, but I do feel like, you know, when you are really, really successful, there are times where we will definitely go and we will buy things that we like, get things that we like, you know, it doesn't matter what it is. And so with that being said, it's the same thing, that people expect a certain thing, you know, from you, and they're expecting you to show up in a particular way. And it's like, okay, well, you know, if you don't have the material possessions, if you don't have a big car or a nice house, you know, and so on, well, then I don't respect you. And those were the expectations that I was looking for because I was your friend. But again, those false expectations that, you know, we try to meet and that we try to adopt, it's not good. Yeah. Who are we at the end of the day?
Yeah, I think that also great points that you're pointing out there. That also goes into just relationships in general, and I feel like a lot of times, especially in this generation, that is a lot of times what feeds the relationships, like expectations. Like usually for the male, it's like, okay, you give money or provide to some sort, and the lady will. There's a bunch of things like you know in terms of just cook, clean, make sure that everything's good, rather than we love each other for each other. Like we got to know each other before we, even, got together, and we know each other as individuals. So I don't expect anything from you, and you don't expect anything from me. Everything that we have and we give is because we're giving love. It's not out of you have to do this for me and I do this, or you have to do this because you're this, or a label. Like there's so many labels, and the labels then give the expectations for each label, and it's so many different things that kind of I feel like blocks love, and I feel like that's what expectations do. Obviously there's good expectations, but I think that expectations blocks the fun, it blocks the love, and just the the genuine vibe sometimes, just being able to just be who you are and be free. It's always something that you're thinking about that you should have done, and that I think that goes into relationships for sure. That goes into I think relationships with family, romantic relationships, friendships, even relationships with your job, maybe and so on and so forth. But that's the thing. So obviously, just be yourself. Like be you. Don't rely on the expectations if they're not doing good for you, if they're not ensuring that you're being a better person, that you're growing on a level, that you're staying in a box. If it requires you to stay in a box to believe it, I think that you should. Okay, hearts. Okay, but yeah.
I wanted to piggyback off of what you were saying, and we want to make sure that we're putting out, it's not just expectations themselves, it's the false and unrealistic expectations. True. That is what we are talking about specifically. If they are false and unrealistic expectations, then that's where you have the problem. But expectations in themselves, just in general, when you're talking about healthy expectations, then that would open the door for like the healthy communication. Yeah. Hey, how can I help you today? Or what is it that I'm expecting you to do for me, or that you were expecting, the other person to do for you, so that way I know how to show up. Yeah. And so when I think of healthy expectations, I think of a healthy balance. I think of teamwork even, or even if that person isn't there physically, that they support what it is that you're doing, and then you reach your goal or your expectations for yourself, and that others again will then be able to see that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. 100%. So in terms of this topic, I there's not much that I wanted to touch on it, other than just than those things, and just kind of just the overall just conclusion of it is just that there are some expectations, the healthy expectations that are always obviously good, that will ensure that you're growing. But when there's any other expectations, just be mindful of how hard you are on yourself and how you get yourself to follow them, and what you're telling yourself. Like I said, affirming yourself. It's always good to healthily affirm yourself and to ensure that you're staying, focused, and that even when the bad things happen, that you're still on track. Because, this world has expectations. Just looking at me, I'm sure that the people could look for expectations for me, and then same for her. And that's just how the world is. So you can't really, get away from it, but what you can get away from is how much you believe it in, and how strong you choose to have your mind when it comes to it, and to ensure that you can keep moving, in a good way.
Yeah, I like what you said, because a couple of things actually came to mind for me. And the one thing that I know for a fact is that when you start trying to meet these unrealistic expectations, whether they are ones that you created or ones that other people have created, we tend to put our own selves in a box, and we are not to be limited, right? We are not the in the box kind of individuals. Our thinking isn't even in the box, if that makes sense. Now, if you're talking about a closed-minded person, well then yeah, that's a different kind of story. But in this particular instance, again, our minds are not something that's supposed to be put in a box. We are supposed to be able to think freely and without any limitations, in the most healthy ways possible. So if you're setting goals, and you're thinking about completing milestones and all those other different things, making progress in certain areas of your life, then to be able to effectively come up with a plan and say, okay, I'm not going to be hard on myself. Every day that goes by, I'm going to feed myself positive affirmations. And one of the things that I also want to say is we can tend to put our identity in the expectations that either others have created or that we have created. And so let's just say, for instance, those expectations don't come to pass, then we're looking in the mirror at ourselves and we're looking at our hands and we're saying, oh, well, I'm empty, I'm not valuable. So the fact that I didn't meet these expectations means that I am not really worthy. And again, I don't really have value, and that I'm not good enough, or maybe that I'm weak, I'm not strong, and I'm not capable, when really that's not the case. And I forget the other thing that I was going to share, but if it comes back to me, I'll make sure to display that. Yeah. But yeah, absolutely. Those false expectations are really something that individuals struggle with, and then they don't know how to overcome because they've been programmed for so long.
And you're beating yourself down.
Right, and you're beating yourself down. But again, I was going back to, or wanted to go back to, when I said how people will start something and then they won't finish it, and how they get frustrated because they're not meeting that expectation, or the expectation they have in their mind, whether it's their own or somebody else's. And so if you're sick and tired of being sick and tired of going through that revolving door, they say the definition of insanity is to keep on doing the same thing over again, expecting a different result every time. And so if I keep on doing that, then I have to, and hopefully at some point we'll be able to stop, take a look at the history and play the whole tape through and see, okay, what are the common patterns here? What is it exactly that keeps on happening that is causing me to fall into this hole? Because this is what I don't want to continue anymore. So once you start taking a step back, they say the first step is acknowledging what the issue is. Yeah. And so once I acknowledge it, then I can say, okay, you know what? Now I'm ready to move forward, and I'm ready to start going through things with a fine-tooth comb. Right. And saying, all right, this is where I see one of my problems is. I'm not really kind to myself, and I look at other people and what they're doing, and I try to compare my behind the scenes to their front of the scenes. And that's another thing that gets me caught up and puts me in a hole, and which makes it more difficult for me to get out.
Yeah, 100%. So we'll leave that off on, please always evaluate yourself, be kind to yourself, love yourself, understand that if you don't have yourself, that you always, if you don't have anybody, that you always have yourself.
That's right.
And that it's always important to ensure that you are being the best person for you, not necessarily for always for others, but always for you. And if you do it for you, then it will be for others.
That's right.
So thank you. Always make sure that you guys like, comment, subscribe, turn on those post notifications. We appreciate you always, Twitch people. Thank you for tuning in. You guys are the GOATs. You always see it early. And join our YouTube channel, obviously.